I think it's been about a month and a half since I last uploaded anything of substance on this channel, but I want to hop in today and talk a little bit about some card design stuff in Digimon as a way to get back into it. Before we talk about purple, the exact reason I wanted to make this video and probably a few more videos in the future is because I honestly just enjoy thinking about this kind of stuff. But along with that, I've been playing TCGs for most of my life, along with, strategy games, video games, stuff like that. And as I've mentioned before, I really like getting into the weeds when I play games, trying to make sure I understand them and whatnot. And like as a consequence, I've noticed that frequently when people discuss decks, themes, new support, and even things like restrictions or bans, while they don't completely disregard card design, it's almost considered as like an afterthought, even though it's probably one of the most important things. This is actually one of the reasons I think that, like for Yu Gi Oh!, even though Yu Gi Oh! Might be slow with doing the exact hits that we need done, I feel like I'm usually pretty on point with what is going to get hit and why, as long as it's, something that's in my awareness. The Tyrant Neptune blew my mind, bro. So it just kind of amounts to the idea that when I hear people talk about cards and card games, they don't necessarily put enough weight on the card design aspect of things. And I'm wanting to draw a little bit of attention to that today, especially because Digimon has experienced the exact same issue for the third time now. And it's kind of obvious as like why this is an issue. All that said, let's use a Pokemon as a jump off point. So this guy was released in BT15, which came out I think on September 23rd in Asian regions and February 16th in Western regions. Yeah. And this guy, in conjunction with Anubis like EX5 as a whole, really led to a lot of purple cards being restricted. Now, I saw a lot of people quit the game over this, just not liking the fact that purple was being heavily restricted, but I think this was a long time coming. And to explain this a little, I'm actually going to read something I wrote. I wrote this in a server a couple of days ago. And oh, yeah, it actually came up because we were talking about potential ban list things. Now, when you look at any given color at baseline, they will mostly go through 4 to 5 cards in their deck in 2 turns early game. I specifically mean how many will end up in their hand, not necessarily how many they see, because different decks have different types of searchers. Some do top three, some do top four, some do top five. We have a 50 card deck, so 5 in hand, 5 in security. You have 40 cards remaining. For the average deck, if you go first, you'll Evo from your Digitama to level 3 for nothing, drawing 1 card by game mechanic, right? Then you do the same thing going into your level 4, you draw a second card. Next turn, you draw. So that's 3 cards out of deck. And then maybe you search with a Digimon or an option card, potentially repeatedly, depending on how much memory you have. And this will leave you with a 36 to like 35 card deck. Like, generally speaking, at most, you'll go through 4 or 5 cards, rarely 6 cards in the first 2 turns of the game. And this is okay. Purple, however, goes through considerably more, even as far back as BT7. So, you digivolve the Demimeramon into Goblimon, you digivolve that into Eismon, you pass to your opponent, right? So you're on a 38 card deck. They pass back to you, you draw a card for turn, that's 37, and you swing into their security. If this Eismon gets deleted, you draw 3, trash 2. The Goblimon is draw 2, trash 1. And then the Demimeramon is draw 1, trash 1. You now have 31 cards in deck, and you haven't played a searcher for the turn. So you can easily go through a fourth of your deck potentially just because you're playing purple. You have a higher deck velocity because you're doing filtering rather than top deck searching. You're technically speaking more consistent than other colors would be. And this doesn't even get into the fact that this Eismon existed at 4 copies at the time. So if in any of your trashing you manage to trash this, you just get free bodies potentially. This was actually another thing that made Scatter Mode an absurdly good card because the opponent was already afraid to remove it because it might present you high value in like a Beelstar deck potentially, right? But in addition to that, they had to be concerned that you would very likely see some number of Eismon in the process of digging into your deck. And if those bodies got played out, because hey, you got a scatter mode and trash now. When they pass over to you, they can just get swung at because they don't have summoning sickness. They weren't played on your turn. And this is more egregious because you end up with extra copies of Eismon, Scatter Mode, and Trash as the game goes on. Maybe you want to hold on to these a little bit, right? These can be really, really big, and you could very easily use them to remove your opponent's larger bodies. Because this was also a period of time where I think the vast majority of like top end level sixes and everything tended to be around 11 KDP. So it was also kind of easy to crash if you had 3 Eismon scatter mode in your trash. Pretty crazy. And this doesn't even consider the fact that another card that I didn't add here, Calling, was also printed in BT7. So I did see some people on 4 copies of this, but I saw a lot of lists that were only on 2. I don't really remember what the average was, but if you were running 4 of this, you could just delete your body yourself in the event it failed to be deleted by your opponent. That would get you the pieces you cared about back, so the Gabumon and the Eismon, right? And then you could still do some kind of searcher as your final play. If you decided to use Mist Memory Boost, though, you would trash 2 cards and then draw 1, which means you'd go through 12 out of the 40 cards remaining in your deck. Right? Like your deck velocity as a purple deck, how quickly you go through your cards is so much higher. And then there are cards like Beelstar, who reduces her cost based on the number of 7 cost options in your trash. So she can be played for relatively cheap, cheaper than her options, and that's good value because then she uses that option for free. Even getting a 1 memory discount on some of these options is really, really good. And as the game goes on, she just gets cheaper and cheaper and cheaper and she still presents this absurd amount of value. I think there was probably some intent to have this be meaningfully paced or something like that, but in practice, it very frequently wouldn't end up like that. And I think this is one of the reasons why, even though people don't tend to run these cards anymore because they're restricted to one, there are instances they will. And I can't really knock anybody for doing it in terms of deck building because it's still absurdly good value. Now, we go to EX5, and I initially actually said that I didn't think that like this card being hit in addition to this, or no, it might have been I thought the Gurumon X antibody being hit in addition was a bit much, but after having played with it not too long after I said that, like after that ban list came up, these cards being at 1 makes too much sense. This thing is way too flexible. It is genuinely the best type of searcher effect that I have seen because it checks the top 4 cards of your deck. Of course, they're top 5 checks, but the thing that matters is it adds 2 cards with Garurumon or X antibody in their names among them to the hand. This means it can add the X antibody protoform option, it can add the original X antibody option, it can add Dobermon X, it can add Cerberusmon X. Wow. It can add copies of itself, which there are a lot of rookies that don't have the capability to do that. It's not completely unheard of, but it's just kind of notable in my opinion. It can add Grumon X antibody, and it can even add duplicates of any of these cards. So this thing is an absurdly consistent searcher that you digivolve for 0 on top of your Goblimon, and then you trash 1 card in your hand, which gives you setup for your inheritable, which gives it battle protection 1 time, basically. This thing draws 2 and then trashes 2, which initially seems like a bit of a detriment, right? Because oh, I'm losing cards in hand. But again, it plays to the same angle. And if you have Gurumon or X Antibody in its Digivolution cards, you gain a memory. So with this one, it's very easy to potentially, gain a memory off your Gabumon if your opponent choked you to one, right? So now you're at two. You Digivolve up into this, you grab your pieces, you Digivolve up into this, you draw one trash one, then you Digivolve up into this, right? You draw two trash two and gain a memory. So you're back at one memory in the process of going to level four. You can swing out at your opponent to draw one trash one off of these things and potentially still digivolve up your line. And this isn't even getting into the fact that you could use protoform to not need one of your base materials, right? But still have all of your effects live because this thing is still counted as X antibody. The Gilmon package is very similar to the Gabumon one in terms of what it does, but the way it does it is slightly different. You digivolve up your line, so you're drawing cards off of that inherently, right? You got your Gilmon X Antibody Searcher, you got the draw one trash one on the Growlmon X Antibody, but it also floats back into a Gilmon, so you can keep getting access to this. There is the Gigimon Digitama that I forgot to include here, which will put one of your pieces back to hand, so you can get the Growlmon X Antibody or the Growlmon back, whichever one you really need the most, and continue doing your thing. This is a little more absurd though, because you're gaining memory in the process of doing this. So, you're gaining two as long as you have access to your level four, or potentially a way to reduce digivolution costs, such as protoform, for your Growlmon X antibody, you can keep doing that play, filling up trash by pitching something off of this and milling two off of this, until you get to the point where you can rush your opponent down with these Gilmons and whatever else it is you have access to. This is made much more consistent by the existence of stuff like Gravity Crush as well, right? And I guess to briefly talk about the zero cost memory options, those cards I think were largely designed at points in the game, except for Hammer Spark. I don't know why Hammer Spark is written the way it is. But the other three, Gravity Crush, Blinding Ray, and Jack Raid, kind of made sense at the point they were introduced in the game because they each had an offset. It's just with this absurd level of consistency and the absurd level of filter, you get big value off of Jack Raid much more quickly than you realistically should be. With Gravity Crush, you should pay your taxes, but you're not gonna be doing that. You're just gonna blow your opponent up before you have to. And with Blinding Ray, losing security just isn't necessarily always a detriment anymore, right? So this is a instance where like the card design made sense for what the game was at the point in time they were created, but as things have progressed, they definitely needed to be sequestered off, potentially restricted, potentially banned, because they're doing too much in the modern game. And I do think, taking them out of rotation is healthy. I honestly think it's probably best to ban them outright. But hey, I'm not Bandai. I can't control the whims of the ban list committee. Overall, I think that like Purple does still have some interesting design, but it's also really notable that I think Purple has some of the worst design as well. Genuinely, why did they print this? This card to me is probably the most offensive thing about the third block because it completely subverts the memory system when that's kind of consistently been the thing that people have said, hey, we should avoid this if nothing else. Admittedly, it's much less consistent now that this guy is limited to one, but this just results in people doing scam plays with this guy that involve like end of turn gaining memory to not pass to the opponent. What can you do? Really? I don't know, dude. They really I just hope that going forward they try to do some off the beaten path type of stuff with purple so we don't encounter these same issues again. But, we'll just have to see how things go. Okay. I think that's about it for today. And to, reiterate what I've said so far, purple is just a color where the combination of Digimon's inherent game mechanics and the way the cards are designed lend it to kind of outvaluing other colors inherently. And I think for that reason, it's important for the design of purple cards going forward to be a bit more mindful. I am looking forward to the restriction list since that's going to happen on, I think, the 23rd. And maybe I'll talk about that as well. We'll have to see. But yeah, I don't know what color I'm gonna talk about next. Maybe I'll just go with yellow because DP minus and lingering DP minus and some of the other stuff that yellow has access to are worth going over. But I'm open to suggestions. Anyway, I'm gonna get out of here. I clocked out, I think, like 4 hours ago, and I'm hella tired. So, y'all have a good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. Peace.